Hello, students of Philosophy of Education. Welcome to week 8, in which we focus on indigenous knowledge and, in particular, indigenous philosophy of education, and indigenous education itself. We do that by considering justice for indigenous peoples and the implications of indigenous philosophy for education. So, of course, the history of indigenous peoples in Canada becomes more prominent in public discourse in general and in education in particular. The response of the federal government becomes also more evident in a variety of areas, including education. And this week, we consider related issues through philosophical examination. We have, as usual, two themes. The first one examines the issue of reconciliation. The title is Reconciliation, Inclusion versus Political Sovereignty. So, this theme mostly focuses on a Hopkins article and a response to this article by McDonough. So Hopkins and McDonough present alternative approaches for rectifying injustices made to indigenous peoples. What I'm asking you is to briefly explain those approaches and their implications for education. But moreover, I'm asking for your opinion on this debate, particularly with regard to the Canadian context. I'm asking what do you think about this debate? Do you take a side here and support one of the approaches to address indigenous peoples in Canada, or maybe you think that this issue of indigenous people's future is actually in the hands of each indigenous peoples, or perhaps you think that the debate between Hopkins and McDonough is not relevant or not appropriate, following the calls to actions made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And I'm giving you in the theme a link for these calls for action. In your answer, you might want to reflect on issues mentioned in the article in the text. Issues like the distinction between colonialism and coloniality, the role of education in taking responsibility, and whether deliberative democracy can facilitate a reconciliation. And pay attention that a central question here is what justice means in the case of indigenous groups. The second theme is entitled Indigenizing and Decolonializing Education, and this mostly refers to the chapter by Lagrange and Mika. In these texts, they explain how indigenous philosophy in general and indigenous philosophy of education, as well as indigenous ways of knowing, are significantly different from Western ways of knowing and Western philosophy and philosophy of education. I'm asking you, using the explanation provided in this chapter, to offer two practical suggestions for decolonializing and indigenizing education, again based on indigenous philosophy or indigenous ways of knowing. another way of seeing it is practical suggestions for shaping education that is informed by an indigenous philosophy or indigenous ways of knowing. The suggestions should speak to particular educational aspects and or practices. For example, teaching, learning, curriculum design, teacher education, and of course there are many other examples. I'm asking you how these practices, as they are taken in the West, would look like if they will follow and be designed by through indigenous or considering indigenous philosophy. Consider in your answers categories and aspects such as ontology, epistemology, and axiology that are discussed in the reading. And again, just one example for an insight or item that you can consider is that in indigenous philosophy or epistemology, in this case, knowledge is not an individual pursuit and is never owned by an individual. So of course this will have profound impact on education. So I'm asking you to understand the tenets of indigenous philosophy of education and think what would be implications for particular practices in education. So that's it for this week. I hope that you will enjoy the readings and thinking about the assignments and the writing of the answers. Bye bye.